Orange and blue today. Cecil, Lammey, Andrew Mason here to talk Broncos and Steelers a little bit, Mace. We're going to get into the preview a little later in the week, but we did have some news today from Mike Tomlin saying he's preparing Justin Fields to be the starter, and that means no Russell Wilson, buddy.
Potentially no Russell Wilson. We're not going to get the rematch, it would seem. It makes sense for the Steelers because this calf injury has dogged Russell Wilson back to training camp. And when it popped up again last week, I mean, now you're seeing something persist. It's kind of like a hamstring injury, right? So they're right to be careful on this. Let's face it, we're denied clicks and views probably because of it, because if it's Justin Fields versus the Broncos, it's just another game, really. It doesn't have the same spicy nature that we were expecting it to have. But we'll get into it further. If you look at the Justin Fields passing chart, Cease, it looked a lot like a typical Russell Wilson passing chart. There really wasn't all that much over the middle. So we might be seeing a very similar brand of football, maybe with a little more dynamic running element to it than we would have gotten if Russell Wilson had been in there. I don't think it changes all that much in terms of the matchup, but it changes a lot in terms of the hype.
Yeah, it definitely changes the hype surrounding this. And in the matchup, Mace, for me, and again, we'll get more into it later the week, but if it's not Russell Wilson, it's actually more dangerous because Justin Fields is a better runner at this point of his career.
Another thing to think about, another thing for the Broncos defense to consider, and a challenge for a safety core that in week one was okay. Not great. Some missed tackles. And also a challenge for Alex Singleton, who had the interception on the second play of the game on Sunday off of the pressure, but also was left flailing and chasing on 2 Seahawk touchdowns there in the second half.
Yeah. And can the Steelers replicate that? Can they duplicate that? We shall see. For me, it comes down to what did they learn from week one? Offensively and defensively, like, can they take some of those lessons? And certainly if tempo is used as a weapon, as Seattle did it with their gun runs in the second half and using up tempo on the offense, if I'm the Steelers, that's almost the first thing I do. It's like, okay, let's test your guys' stamina and see if we can wear you down. Plus the 3 and outs on offense don't help. It all ties together.
The question is whether Justin Fields and his knowledge of the Steelers scheme and how far he's come, will he be able to go up tempo? Will he be able to run that offense up tempo? That's the thing it could hold that could hold them back from doing a lot of that. But if you are watching the Broncos film, whether you're the Steelers or a future opponent, you see how Seattle, going at a quicker pace, discombobulated the defense in the second half. Now, some of it, the Broncos will tell you, was on their own energy and effort coming out of the locker room. And that's actually something that Malcolm Roach talked about on Monday. Let's hear from him real quick before we continue kind of diving into the third quarter woes that happened after the Seahawks went tempo.
First thing it should be is memory, remembering that feeling of just how hyped the game was and how the emotions was rocking. Everybody was on top of the world. We got, I think, 2 safeties by then or 3 safeties by then. We were rolling on defense and, just knowing like, okay, we got to keep it at this level. We got to keep the attention to detail. We got to keep the energy. We got to keep we got to, everything we're doing, even if we're making adjustments, we got to stay in that moment of, that type of energy, that focus. And I feel like, that's something that we can learn from when we go into halftime against Pittsburgh and when we come out of halftime, coming out there and ready to regroup and, lock in for that third quarter so we don't have that type of drop-off again.
Now, one thing that can help, and this is a good sign from last Sunday, Broncos, according to ESPN Analytics, they were 4th in the league in pass rush win rate on Sunday.
Very good.
Very good. Jonathan Cooper in particular had a big week, but you talk about an area that was a problem last year. and was the exact opposite. Broncos 4th in pass rush win rate, 6th in run stuff win rate, pass blocking win rate on the offensive side 20th, run blocking win rate 6th. So pass protection, a bit of a concern there. The run blocking win rate still being top 10 tells you where some of the issues resided when it came to running the football, and why Shawn Payton on Monday was focused on the running backs more so than other elements of the run game in terms of what went wrong in that aspect.
Yeah, and if you're going to prevent from going 3 and out to give your defense more of a rest, you've got to run the ball, and that means running backs have to stop dancing. It's a timing and rhythm game, Mace, and when Javonte is dancing, he's slow to the hole. And when Jaleel, who we love, but when Jaleel's too fast to the hole's not developed yet. So you have to wait until you see that hole and time it to burst through at the right time. And it seemed like Javonte was dancing too much, and Jaleel was maybe running before his blocks were ready too much.
Yeah, that's the vision thing that gets talked about a lot, right? And it's also the Goldilocks thing. You know, the first bowl is too hot, the second bowl is too cold, the third bowl is just right. You know, the first, talk about Javonte Williams, he's dancing, he's not getting there fast enough. Jaleel's getting there too fast. You have to have the happy medium that's just right to make it work. The Broncos didn't have that.
Yeah, the offensive line was getting it done. The Quinn Miners question and answer from a Zoom, we don't have it, so we're not going to play it, Mace, but I know you know the question, like, what do the offensive line need to improve? And Quinn, paused for, it seemed like forever, but there was a 10-second pause, well, what we're going to do is going to clean up some technique stuff. So a lot of people on sports talk radio have wondered, what did Quinn mean by that? I think Quinn means, he means well, but also they got their job done run blocking. They'll need to be better pass blocking going forward.
Yeah. When in the sports talk radio land, because admittedly, I don't really listen to much. What is being implied by the pause, or what do people say is being implied by the pause? Is that something on the quarterback?
It's something on the running backs, running back, make a play, make a play.
Yeah.
You were there for that call. You got to experience the pause in real time. Did it mean anything to you?
I thought he was just kind of gathering his thoughts, and it was the old Lisa Simpson phrase that sometimes it takes time to properly sugarcoat a response. We referred to that when Shawn Payton was talking about Zach Wilson back in July at the start of training camp.
Right.
I thought it was something along those lines.
Okay. Well, we'll see how they respond this week. But they've got to run the ball. This is something, I'm going to play the clip here from Shawn Payton. This is after the game and him going back over the Seattle game at the podium. Of course, I hasn't watched the game tape, but it's clear Shawn Payton said 1,000% you got to run the ball.
I think I don't know how many balls we dropped. And so I've said this before, for any quarterback playing, we've got to be more effective running the football. We'll see the rushing. If you take away his scrambling yards, I think we're somewhere 60 yards rushing to their 140. So not nearly good enough.
60 to 140. That's not great. And it comes down to trust. Javonte, trust your eyes better. You don't have to dance. You're not a dancer. Jaleel, just slow down a little bit, then turn on the speed. And with Audric Estime, Mace, just hold on to the rock. I think maybe there was more there had Estime not fumbled on one of his 2 carries.
Yeah, and that's an example of trying to, as Shawn Payton said, kind of trying to be something you're not. You don't want to curb the instinct from the player, but at the same time, he pointed to the thing that Estime has in his locker, that Barry Sanders Ghostbusters thing, slash through it, no, but Jerome Bettis, yes. And Malcolm Roach refers to Audric Estime as mini bus.
Okay.
The Jerome Bettis reference, and hey, they both Bettis and Audric Estime are Notre Dame running backs, Notre Dame products. So you got to know what you are. I mean, it was something I said to you and Josh Dover on the radio today about the gifts of each player and using those gifts. use Audric Estime and have him do what he does best, which is power running through people. Just as in the passing game, take advantage of the gifts that Marvin Mims Jr. has as part of your receiving core and get him downfield and don't leave him unused. He's not a toy that should be sitting on the shelf. He needs to be worked in there. Even though he may not have everything you want short to intermediate, you need that speed vertical threat. And the other thing I would also say is start working Troy Franklin up. And I'm not saying he's going to be ready to play just yet, but get him ready because he also brings a vertical speed threat with more size than Marvin Mims Jr. has. But, I think there are some answers long term that are already there on the roster, but you've got to actually take advantage of the gifts of the players to capitalize on that.
Yeah, they've got playmakers. They need to let their playmakers play. And with the Estime thing, and other players too, Mace, the feeling that I got watching the game against Seattle was some guys were trying to do too much. Like I can leap over this guy. Like, don't please. And you look at players maybe trying to stretch out the ball a little bit more or doing things where, Javante's dancing to try to, I can make this break play. Like, no, just go where the hole's at, lower your shoulders and plug it up there, get what they're going to give you that time. Live to fight another day. So whether it's Estime or Javante or others, at least my feel was at times, Mace, guys were trying to do too much and not play within themselves.
Yeah, and in the first half, I don't really get that. Like Audric Estime with that play up the middle. First half, the game's within your control. I get it in the second half when you're down 2 scores in the fourth quarter. You're trying to do something. You're trying to make a play to reverse the flow of things. There was no reason to do that for the early part of the game. Now, that being said, we've talked about the inability to take advantage of that. So you want guys on point, but you want guys on point playing with themselves. It's like a baseball thing. Sometimes you just want that nice, easy swing to get on base. You don't need to be swinging for the fences and creating a little mini tornado when you whiff there at the plate over and over again. Sometimes you just want to have that nice, easy, relaxed swing that's within yourself, and poke a single to right field and get on base. That's okay. That's actually perfectly okay, because the other thing is that sort of mentality and that sort of game keeps you on schedule. And this Broncos offense was completely off schedule for most of the day. In part because maybe you're trying to make too much happen on first down. And then you sit there and you basically whiff, and next thing you know, you're looking at 3rd and 9. And the key for this offense and the key for Bo Nix to succeed is it's got to be on schedule. If you give Bo Nix 3rd and 4, I think it's going to work out pretty well most of the time. Bo Nix 3rd and 9 or any quarterback 3rd and 9, you're not going to have a great shot of consistency.
Yeah, when you mentioned 3rd and 4, that's 2 3-yard runs. So the 3-yard run for Javante, that's not bad. And staying on schedule and on rhythm is something that this seemed off. We'll talk about Bo Nix specifically. Shawn Payton talked about how there was a play where it called for a 5-step drop and Bo did a 3-step drop.
Mm-hmm.
So, your timing is completely off because one, your depth of your drop isn't the same. The route combination, the stems aren't even there. So the receivers aren't open. You're at 3 instead of 5. So your line is blocking for you to be back at 5. And that's on Bo, right? That's on Bo to maintain that. So everyone needs to trust the system, calm down a little bit, and maybe, those nerves will go away.
You got to hit your marks in this. The mark says you got to be if you got to be a 5-step drop, you have to hit it. The whole thing unravels. It's the nature of this offense. It is intricate. It is precise. When it works, somebody's always going to be open. But everybody has to do their job to make sure it does work. So, and that starts with Bo Nix having the proper steps in his drop. And like you said, offensive linemen, tackles especially, they're gauging what they're doing around 3 or 5 steps. If it's a 3-step drop, they're going to use the edge to their advantage, guide the pass rusher behind, which is why drifting becomes a problem. And not that we saw drifting from Bo Nix, but you look at last year when Russell Wilson would drift, and other previous offenses around here. Trevor Siemian had a problem with drifting with Gary Kubiak. And what that does is when the quarterback drifts back, all of a sudden the tool that the tackle was using as part of basically the geometry of what they're trying to do, taking advantage of all that area behind the quarterback. When the quarterback drifts and has a longer drop than expected, all of a sudden it's blown up, and people see that and say, oh, the tackle got beat. Well, that's a sack that's on the quarterback, right? So if the quarterback has goes 5 steps instead of 3, and he gets sacked or pressured, and that pressure is coming from off the outside edge, that's not on the tackle. It's on the QB.
Mm-hmm. I said on the air, Bo Nix's worst enemy on Sunday was Bo Nix. That was it. Like, he was getting in his own way at times, and that's one example of how he did that.
And I mean, it's not that I think it's too big for him.
No.
It's test time. Because one thing we've heard over and over is he doesn't make the same mistake twice. That's something you hear from the coaches a lot, all right? So are these mistakes going to be corrected? It's one thing to not make the same mistake twice in practice. It's another in the games. And of course, in the games, you kind of go to ingrained behavior. You panic a little. You can panic a little bit under duress. What is that going to look like going forward? I've got a piece that's if it's not up yet, it will be at denversports.com. There are quite a few quarterbacks who turned out to be outstanding who look really bad in their debuts.
Sure.
Worse than Bo Nix. That being said, when we adjust for era in terms of passer rating, these week one starts, Bo Nix is down there when we adjust for error. Like, he's in the bottom 10 since the merger. It wasn't good. Now, some of that's not, there are a couple of drop passes, yes. So, and it's not all on him, but he didn't play well. All these things we're talking about that went wrong. Bo Nix is not without culpability. It doesn't mean he's not going to work out and be successful, but it does mean that this is not strictly a thing where you say, oh, it's everybody else. Yeah, everybody else did struggle, but Bo Nix struggled too. It's, they all kind of went down together. There wasn't a lot on the offense where you said, boy, this guy played well. Boy, this guy had an above average game. I'd say probably the only one on the offense who had an above average game for their, usual norms was Mike McGlinchey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And aside from him, I think everybody else had a game where they're like, you could have done plenty better.
Mm-hmm. Even Devon Vele with those 8 targets and 8 catches, you could have broke some tackles.
Yeah,
could have extended some stuff.
I mean, that's another thing. Like, if this is going to work, if this offense is going to work, broken tackles are going to have to be a part of it. Now, Bo Nix has got to lead the receiver to set up the chance for more yardage after the catch. But Cease, man, I mean, how many times did you just look and it was another guy going down like they were shot?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's not leading them the right way. And with Bo Nix with a couple of picks, it could have been 4, could have been 5.
It could have. Yes, this game could have been a lot worse for Bo Nix.
Yes,
a lot worse.
Yep.
Make no mistake about it.
I'll go to 2 things before we wrap up today's program. And we have the distinct, pleasure experience of being 2 of the only people from the Denver media that were there. But at the Senior Bowl, his first day wasn't great. I go back to the second thing is his first game at Oregon against Georgia, by the way.
Awful.
Terrible.
Also 0 touchdowns, 2 picks.
2 picks, and could add more.
Yeah.
So, but then his next game, Eastern Washington, granted, and Pittsburgh is not Eastern Washington, had 5 touchdowns.
Yeah, but I mean, forget about Eastern Washington and just look at the arc the rest of the season. And then by the end of the year, he's playing in the Holiday Bowl. Bo Nix in Oregon on one side, Drake May in North Carolina on the other. And by then, Drake May was already getting a lot of buzz. And Bo looked pretty good juxtaposed with Drake May in that game.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was a game where I still liked May's overall overall talent level. I mean, again, he's got some clubs in his bag as far as kind of dynamic throws that aren't necessarily Bo Nix's best thing. But the fact that in that game, a quarterback showcase, Bo Nix was able to go kind of drive for drive and stride for stride with someone who ended up being the number 3 overall pick in the draft, I think kind of showed where he was starting to go in terms of his NFL outlook. And then, I mean, to throw with another first-round pick this year, Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr. were equals when they were out there in those classic Oregon-Washington duels. Yes, Washington won both of them. Doesn't mean that Bo Nix wasn't up for the challenge and did well. It's still a team game. You can have a great game and lose. And that's what we saw from Bo in those games. So I use the baseball example of a minor league player working his way up and figuring things out at every level, every step along the way. The evidence shows that Bo Nix can figure things out at this level based on how he figured things out and adjusted in the past. But the clock is ticking. Like that's the thing. And the clock is ticking. To me, I don't think we do a checkpoint until after 5 games.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. I mean, we're going to keep talking about it week to week, game by game. But as far as like a checkpoint of kind of where is he stacking up compared to others, I don't think we really start diving into that until after the 5th start.
Yeah. Patience and perspective. Yeah. 2 things very sorely needed right now.
5th start, and then you kind of go through a season like 5th start, then half a season. I mean, I think back to how with Drew Lock, when did the chatter really start happening? What started happening after the 2020 season? By then he had 18 starts. So a little more than a full season. If Bo Nix starts all 17 games this year or 16 out of 17, that's enough to say, okay, full season, where are we? What does it look like?
Yep.
After one game, like some of the chatter out there is just patently ridiculous.
1,000% ridiculous. And it's why I asked you on the air. I'll reiterate it today or right here on this show. Like, the guys in the locker room feel a lot better than the people outside the building.
Yep. I mean, Pat Surtain had that deleted tweet, but I think what Pat said reflects where that locker room is. And there's a lot less of focusing on the quarterback and more a lot of players in there focusing on, man, I fouled that up.
Yep.
I dropped that pass. I missed that. I missed that hole. I missed that block. I
didn't break up that
tackle. Didn't break up. Like, you want to know, like, there was to put this one on Bo Nix is farcical when I'd say probably everybody, but maybe McGlinchey, Jonathan Cooper, Riley Dixon had a night. Tremont Smith, basically almost everybody. You could sit there and say, "Hey, you did your part in that loss to make it happen." Even Pat Surtain.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, for sure. There's some my bad plays there.
Yeah. Although Surtain. He had a good game on balance, it was didn't allow DK Metcalf to game break at his expense. But yeah, and even I mentioned McGlinchey had a couple of plays where he allowed some pressure as well. Although overall, into his pass block win rate was pretty good in that game. So, but yeah, few and far between. The Broncos lost this game, and unfortunately, it was a winnable game, and just about everybody did their part to ensure they lost.
Yep. We're doing our part. I'm doing our part. I'm doing my part. We will be.
There's a lot more on the. I guess you could say there's a lot more in week 1. I didn't do.
Blank. Programming note, and this is the way it's going to be during the regular season. On Wednesday and Thursday, we're going to be at 4:30. There's too much to do. We'll both be in the locker room. We've got production things to work on. So just a programming note, 4:30 on Wednesdays and Thursdays.
Yeah, bear with us on this, but we appreciate those of you who are watching live, but there's a huge audience that watches after the fact as well. The goal is to have the best possible show for that kind of 24-hour cycle. And doing that means we got to make sure we get some production elements in before we go live. So that's why we're shooting for 4:30 Wednesdays and Thursdays. It's a better show, a better experience. Hope you appreciate it. Hope you like it. Thanks as always for watching and writing with us. That's our public service announcement about showtimes.
Yes. And until then, we need your help. How can they help us out on YouTube, Mace?
Like,
comment,
share,
subscribe,
hit that notification bell. Ding.
So that's you.
Never miss
vid. He's Andrew Mason. You follow him on all the socials at Mace Denver. I'm at Cecil Lammey saying OBT's a BFD. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned and stay frosty.